Today we are diving into a really important piece of research. It focuses on the fundamental stories, the narratives that kind of underpin American identity. Specifically, we're looking at an excerpt titled America's Foundational Narrative, Equality and Decency. So our core mission here is to really distill the specific two-part structure of this particular narrative that's being proposed and to understand the very high conditions it seems to set for collective success. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right. And the source, it tells us immediately we're not looking for some, nostalgic, settled story. Not at all. We are thrown straight into a pretty high-stakes discussion because the text opens by acknowledging a fundamental tension right up front. There's always been a fight over the true story of America. So it doesn't offer a simple history lesson. It suggests the narrative itself is like a continuous battlefield, one that requires constant participation from everyone. We're examining this specific framework, the principles it demands, yeah, but also the behavioral mandates. What's required for this particular story to actually, deliver on its promises?
That opening statement is so critical, isn't it? Because intuitively, when you hear foundational, you expect stability. You think of something built, cemented, agreed upon way back when. But the author here says the defining characteristic is conflict, a continuous fight over the true story of America. So if a nation's core identity is perpetually debated, what does that really imply about the stability of the whole thing? Why highlight that disagreement right at the start?
Well, it immediately contextualizes the entire argument, doesn't it? Think about it. If you read history as some fixed, finished text, you can be passive about it, just accept it. But by saying the story is always contested, the author forces you, the listener, to realize this is ongoing. It's an active process of interpretation and, crucially, choice. The narrative isn't something just handed down, inherited. It's something you have to consciously choose and maybe defend every single day.
Okay, so it's active, not passive.
Exactly. And that choice has real implications. If we accept this premise that the narrative is unsettled, then selecting this specific foundational narrative of equality and decency becomes inherently a political act. And a moral act, too. You're choosing this set of guiding principles over others that are also out there being fought for in that same battlefield of ideas.
That adds a fascinating layer.
Yeah.
Yeah. It shifts the discussion from just, analyzing history to actively selecting an ideology. It reminds us our story isn't just about what happened back then, but what we choose to believe should guide us now, going forward.
Oh.
Okay, so if we accept the story is contested, then
Right.
we have to make a choice. Let's transition that. Let's talk about the specific belief the author puts forward as the guiding light here. What's the fundamental moral ideal in this proposed narrative?
The source is very clear on this. It says, I believe deeply in the story that says we're all created equal. Now notice how that's presented. It's not just the starting line. It's framed as a deep internal commitment. The distinction there is really crucial, I think. The author doesn't just say, I believe in the law that says we should strive for equality or, I agree with the policy.
Right, it's I believe deeply.
Exactly. They use the term deep conviction.
And what's the significance of phrasing it like that, as a deep conviction? Why does that subtle difference matter so much, do you think?
Well, because a conviction goes deeper than legislation, doesn't it? Laws can be changed, repealed, policy can be altered. A deep conviction, though, that's an internal moral structure. It's supposed to guide your behavior even when laws don't enforce it, or maybe especially when others are actively pushing against it. Think of it like this. A law often requires compliance, just following the rule. A conviction demands fidelity, like loyalty to an idea.
Ah, okay. Compliance versus fidelity. That's a helpful distinction.
Yeah. So this narrative, it relies first and foremost on that internal moral commitment, the idea that every single individual, regardless of who they are, where they come from, what they have right now, holds equal inherent worth. That provides the sort of unwavering moral basis for whatever collective action comes next. It suggests, essentially, that your heart has to be in the right place before your hands can really do the right work.
That makes a lot of sense. The belief in universal equality is the internal starting point, the indispensable philosophy almost. But what really jumps out is that the author doesn't stop there. It's not enough just to hold the belief, which is where the narrative gets conditional, right? We move from philosophy to action. So what are the operating instructions? How do we realize this belief in practice?
And that brings us right to the second crucial element, behavior. Actual behavior. The source clearly links success, the fulfillment of this whole foundational story, directly to our capacity, our ability to treat each other with decency and respect. Right. So if the belief in equality is let's say, the spiritual contract, then decency and respect are the mandatory daily practices needed to uphold that contract.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. Why does the author have to mandate decency if we already have that deep conviction of equality? I mean, doesn't believing in equality inherently mean you should act decently? It almost sounds redundant.
But that's where the practical reality comes in. Remember the first point. The story is contested. That implies a diverse society full of conflict and disagreement, which the source acknowledges right at the start. So you can believe in the abstract equality of every citizen, sure, but when those citizens hold really different, maybe conflicting views, opinions, goals, that abstract belief, it often breaks down in the day-to-day friction, the rubbing up against each other.
Right, the abstract idea hits messy reality.
Exactly. So decency and respect, in this model, they act as the shock absorbers. They are the mechanisms that ensure the philosophical conviction actually translates into a functional, durable social practice, even amidst disagreement. For instance, if I truly respect your equality, even if I think your idea is completely wrong, I still have to engage with your viewpoint respectfully. I can't just dismiss you as inherently lesser or unworthy of being heard. That behavior, that respect and disagreement, protects the core ideal of equality itself.
So decency is like the necessary firewall. It keeps the system running when the inevitable conflicts spark up. It's the constant work required to maintain that moral foundation day to day. But the source seems to raise the stakes even higher. It defines the outcome of this behavior. It's not just about avoiding conflict or getting along better, is it? It promises something bigger, universal success.
Absolutely. The source sets an extremely ambitious goal here, a really high bar for this foundational narrative. It doesn't just say that if we practice decency, we'll merely, get along better or reduce some partisan fighting. The promise is much bigger. It's that if these conditions, decency and respect, are met, the result is that all of us will be better off. All of us. That's a profound claim about collective well-being.
I want to pause on that phrase for a second. All of us will be better off, because that's really the so what of this whole narrative structure, isn't it? If you look at a lot of political frameworks, they often feel zero-sum. My gain is your loss, or vice versa. But this source seems to be arguing for a positive-sum game, one fueled entirely by how we treat each other. How exactly does being decent translate into, say, universal economic improvement or broader societal progress? What's the mechanism?
Yeah, what's fascinating here is the implicit theory of maybe societal capital that's underpinning it. Think about it. In a diverse, complex society like the one described, one with constant fighting over the story, conflict, and distrust, are huge drags on progress. They just consume energy, resources, focus. They slow everything down. By promoting decency and respect, especially when disagreement is rampant, as the source emphasizes, the author suggests we create an environment where diverse perspectives aren't just shut down or ignored, but are actually safely integrated, heard. Consider.
So, if the scientist who holds completely different political views from me still feels respected in our workplace, she's more likely to stick around, contribute fully, maybe develop that groundbreaking thing that ends up benefiting everyone. Is that the kind of idea?
Precisely. That's a great example. Decency and respect in this framework aren't just presented as nice manners or politeness. They're treated as essential catalysts for collective wealth creation, innovation, societal advancement. If you believe in equality and you practice respect consistently, you theoretically maximize the potential input from all citizens, not just the ones you agree with. So the source links these specific interpersonal actions, courtesy, respect, taking others seriously, directly to that collective universal improvement. It frames the whole narrative as this massive investment in shared potential, really.
It's like the anti-gossip, anti-dismissal clause written into the social contract.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. By ensuring everyone's basic humanity and potential contribution is valued, respected, the entire society gains synergy. It unlocks potential. And that leads to that ultimate promise: all of us will be better off.
Okay, so this structure is incredibly elegant, I have to say. But wow, it's also intensely demanding, isn't it? So what does this all mean when we put the pieces back together? Let's synthesize this. Based on the source, the definition of this foundational American narrative seems to rest on two interdependent pillars. They rely on each other. First, there's the deep, non-negotiable belief in universal equality. That's the required moral ideal, the foundation. And second, there's the constant, reciprocal practice of decency and respect. That's the mandatory social action, the way you build on that foundation.
Exactly. And we have to recognize that the source, therefore, defines the American story not just by a declaration of inherent rights, which is somewhat static, written down, but by a reciprocal obligation of behavior. which is dynamic.
Mm.
It requires continuous effort every day from everyone. The belief is maybe the destination, what we're striving for. The behavior, decency, and respect is how we actually try to get there. And the proposed reward, if we manage it, is that all of us benefit.
And zooming back out now, thinking about that very first line from the source, that statement that the true story is always being fought over, it becomes really clear that this narrative, as described, demands constant conscious decision-making from moment to moment. It's like a never-ending job maintaining this.
Indeed, it really is. If we accept the author's premise that America's foundational story is always being contested, always up for grabs, then that practice of decency and respect becomes arguably the primary tool for managing that inherent conflict, containing it. It's how you argue, how you fight over the story without destroying the very foundation the story is built on. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it, which part of this proposed narrative is actually the most challenging. For any diverse, high-tension society like the one described, what's harder to uphold day to day? Is it maintaining that abstract philosophical commitment to equality, believing it in your head? Or is it the constant, tiring, sometimes really difficult practice of showing basic decency and respect towards those whose version of the true story fundamentally clashes with your own? That requirement for daily, difficult reciprocity. Maybe that's the truest test of whether this kind of foundational narrative can ever be fully realized. Something to think about